morning, the firestorm officials had feared becoming a reality, with a third out-of-control wildfire exploding overnight in the Los Angeles area.
There was a runaway wildfire that swept through here some time ago. Such fires cannot be extinguished in a hurry. Since the fire had closed in on the site from all directions, it reduced everything to rubble. There is nothing but burnt remains where there were homes. Where the fire consumed everything else, this home remains standing. It appears no different from the other burnt houses at first sight. There are no protective walls or guarding structures surrounding it. The sole safeguard from conflagration is in animals. The property owner maintains some 100 caprine creatures. What makes these goats proficient at protecting you from a wildfire that annihilates everything in its path? Could their appetites really outmatch the flames? California was about to find out. Typical Los Angeles scene. The crystal-clear waters of the Pacific Ocean glimmered under a brilliant blue sky, where vast stretches of golden sand stretched towards the distant horizon. In such a resplendent setting, there was a strange and unfamiliar sight as individuals arrived with a huge herd of goats and took them there. The cause of their interest in these multi-million-dollar views was unknown, but these were no ordinary goats. They were California's most innovative resource in the state's ongoing battle against blazing wildfires. The same strategic deployments were occurring everywhere in the state, as officials realized the value of such unique fire prevention tactics. The goats' job was unexpectedly easy, yet ingenious. They ate away at the massive amount of withered vegetation that had piled up during several months of dryness.
Herbivores, aka goats and sheep, have become effective vegetation management.
Undeterred by the blistering 93-degree weather, the goats toiled with measured determination, plowing through acre after acre of dead yellow grass, low-sprouting brush, and cacti. At the same time, they were also eliminating some of Southern California's most persistent invasive species, including thistles and black mustard. According to experts, goats possessed an uncanny talent. Nothing was out of reach for them. Even seemingly inaccessible areas were a distant thought for these agile creatures. Their digestive system was also very adaptable, capable of breaking down nearly any plant material. This adaptability made them gold mines in a specialist service on hillside, plain, and other ground cover clearance by targeted grazing. It had become a treasured tradition for many families. The company had gone beyond goat husbandry alone. Individuals were now establishing profitable rental businesses and selling their animals to municipal governments, schools, and individual customers. Demand was still not lacking because the result was nothing less than miraculous. Just a few days after the goats had completed their work, the transformation was dramatic. With smoke clouds on the horizon heralding the approaching wildfire, the fire would march with relentless intensity, consuming everything in its wake as it deviated erratically with each shift in the wind. The wind currents would fuel the blaze, driving people to run for their lives in desperation while attempting in vain to outrun both the inferno and the suffocating smoke. Then, in a miraculous phenomenon, the fire would proceed to the hillside where the goats had worked their magic and suddenly cease, as if hitting an unseen wall. All of the houses on the opposite side of the hill would be left completely secure, protected by this natural firebreak. One of the best examples of such success was realized at the Ronald Reagan Presidential Library, which held an incredible collection of historical relics, such as Air Force One, a steel beam from the wreckage of the World Trade Center, part of the Berlin Wall, and an exact replica of the Oval Office. In 2019, when the library found itself in the straight line of another Simi Valley, California, blaze, things appeared desperate. There were evacuation notices, and the building was forced to shut its doors. While the Simi Valley fire ultimately cost the Ronald Reagan Presidential Library and Museum nearly $500,000 in olive tree, presidential flag, and communications cable damage, the most amazing fact was that the fire never reached the building itself, even as it surrounded the grounds. Not one campus building was burned or damaged. This wonderful outcome was largely the result of the preventive work done by the goats. Since the yearly risk of fires in California, the library had already contracted 300 animals to graze the area around the building and clear the land,
On the left is the video from earlier where up near the Mountain Gate community, you had hundreds of goats apparently.
And this money turned out to be well worth it. The goats had formed a successful firebreak between the oncoming flames and the library, proving the practical application of using this innovative technique for preventing fires. But how exactly do you control hundreds of goats without turning the landscape into chaos? What kind of system ensures they eat precisely what needs to go, and nothing more? As it turns out, California's goat strategy is far more calculated than most would ever guess. Systematic goat grazing. Systematic grazing management in California is a sophisticated technique of environmental conservation. Every April, when the seasonal rains fade and the weather warms up, a highly coordinated process takes place. Talented herders and their well-trained guard dogs lead the goats to exactly mapped-out grazing grounds, meanwhile transporting on board essential equipment, including water troughs and electric fencing networks, along with provisions for the human workforce. When they arrive, the group installs perimeter fencing in order to control the grazing area and maintain sensitive plants. This strategic action guards some plants and trees from being eaten and allows the goats to graze designated areas. Herders remain awake around the clock, with close coordination between the dogs and the goats. They specifically drive the animals into particular spots so that dry grass and bushes can be systematically cleared out, while keeping particular spaces that are specifically protected. The goats should be carefully monitored to prevent any sort of unwanted intrusion into adjacent territories. The application of this method yields fantastic payoffs with much effort. California is on the front lines of combating devastating wildfires, which have become increasingly familiar, intense, and prevalent since 1980. The 2021 experience in the state was particularly noteworthy, with one catastrophic fire consuming over 1,500 square miles of terrain. The present drought has served only to aggravate the emergency, although welcome rain showers may temporarily relieve conditions. The 2022 wildfire season was reported as pretty tame, with about 470 square miles of land consumed, below the 5-year average of 3,600 square miles. It was cooler and more humid than normal weather that struck California in August 2023, although regretfully, fires did occur, resulting in 4 deaths. Most wildfires occur on slopes fairly close to residences. It is precisely such slopes that the goat grazing program is designed to cover, with the specific purpose of creating protective buffer zones along potential sources of fire and residential structures. These cleared areas provide a buffer in the event of fire to stop the advancement of fire, or a means to prevent its extension.
An unusual rescue, firefighters working to save a group of goats.
When April arrives and the rains cease, the grass will become parched within a short period of time, forming conditions under which even a small spark could ignite a monstrous, perhaps uncontrollable fire. While preventive controlled burning would seem a self-evident solution, such a process is impossible due to the risk of uncontrolled ignition. Chemical treatments are also prohibited, as the chemicals would, by definition, taint the water supply system. Firefighters always attribute 3 key reasons for the origin of wildfires: weather, terrain, and fuel sources. Of these, we can only manipulate the fuel sources. Research shows that land management also contributes a lot, because dead wood and underbrush piling up can lead to dangerous conditions, causing very severe fires. Land management agencies in the past used herbicides and manpower for fuel reduction. However, the use of chemicals on such big surfaces is environmentally dangerous, while the removal by hand is financially impractical on the scale of the operation. This is why agencies and local authorities have employed goat solutions to avert forest fires. Such an approach is particularly suitable in California, which has over 60,000 communities that are prone to wildfire. The U.S. Forest Service conducted an experimental project in 2013 involving 400 goats in a thinning of vegetation program. The project was conducted on 100 acres of the Cleveland National Forest in Southern California, with the objective of establishing a 300-foot buffer zone between forest villages. Though the work traditionally requires much human capital and expert equipment like chainsaws and hand tools, the goats proved to be an economical alternative. According to Forest Service reports, goat clearing pays $900 to $1,200 for 2.5 acres, considerably less than that of using conventional human labor, which costs between $2,000 and $3,700 for the same terrain. Historical evolution and modern implementation of goat-assisted fire prevention. The forest management firm was leading the way in adopting a new and innovative approach to fire suppression and vegetation management. Through their initiative, forestry professionals developed an intricate and complex system of monitoring that was designed to measure and quantify the success and effectiveness of their new policy. A thorough and systematic comparison of conventional methods that have been used for decades with an incredibly unconventional approach, goats as a natural and organic solution for vegetation management in a more environmentally friendly manner. The outcome of this particular scientific study was truly nothing short of phenomenal and remarkable in its findings. The results conclusively demonstrated that these herbivorous animals achieved an astonishingly high 87% reduction in the overall vegetation cover and an impressive 92% decline in the height of the vegetation observed. This extraordinary disparity seen in the landscape holds significant and far-reaching implications for activities aimed at preventing fires. The precise beginnings of this innovative solution are unclear, as there are no documented accounts pinpointing who initially suggested using goats for fire prevention. Nonetheless, it's well documented that one of the earliest applications of this inventive method was executed by a committed couple, veterinarian Bria McGrath and her husband, firefighter Bob. In 1991, they took an important step forward, paving the way for a new era in environmentally responsible fire suppression methods. One of the most fascinating aspects of this technique lies in its numerous benefits. Besides their primary role in controlling shrub growth and decreasing fuel loads for fires, these nimble and agile animals have surprisingly become significant protectors of the environment, playing a crucial role in maintaining ecological balance. As they graze in grassy areas, these animals uncover significant amounts of litter and debris that usually remain hidden within thick foliage. This advantage makes it easier to gather and dispose of waste, which in turn improves the effectiveness of strategies for managing and controlling the ecosystem. The background to this topic is very engaging and rich in detail. In the majority of countries that are situated in the Mediterranean Sea region, for instance, Italy, Greece, and Spain, the goat herd-mediated land use practice has been a long-standing tradition in these countries' agricultural culture. For centuries, these cultures relied heavily on goat herds as the backbone of their agriculture, but the advent of machinery and chemical herbicides resulted in the abandonment of this native practice that had been so integral to their way of life. The transition from the natural process of land management is actually somewhat regrettable and disappointing, especially in view of the amazing efficiency that goats have been shown to have in their ability to manage and control land. It would not be refuted nor questioned that these animals have a valuable contribution to make. In fact, a single herd of goats is able to clear a very large area of some acres of undergrowth, which would otherwise remain unmanaged and even be utilized as fuel by dangerous wildfires, within a short time span of just 2 weeks. The success of this novel method has also drawn universal acclaim and admiration from the devoted firefighting personnel. One of the most eloquent and forceful exhibitions of its exceptional usefulness was during the fierce 2022 fire season, when the goats indeed stole the limelight by performing a fundamental role in assisting with the protection and salvation of a residential complex from immediate peril. Remarkably, these hard-working animals had carefully eaten away the nearby vegetation to an impressive height of just 4 inches, right before a fierce blaze swept through the area. This timely reduction in fuel proved to be a crucial turning point, as it enabled firefighters to navigate safely through the region by skillfully jumping over the dangerous flames. This action ultimately proved to play a major role in the salvation of the majority of the apartments from total annihilation and devastation. The unprecedented success of this project has encouraged a large number of firefighters to adopt it as a personal project, taking a vested interest in its execution. Furthermore, some have gone as far as developing their own goat herds, fully appreciating and acknowledging the potential dividends that this natural fire prevention technique has to offer. On an institutional level, the San Manuel Wells Fire Department has formally adopted the plan, actively managing and maintaining a sizable herd of 300 goats. Through their continuous experiences, they have continuously tested the unbeatable efficiency of these animals, proving them to be a valuable tool in the prevention of fires. The last few years have witnessed California grappling with an extraordinary and unprecedented challenge, as each year, fires have devastated and consumed approximately 395,000 acres of land across the state. In light of the growing challenges posed by these harmful events, goats have emerged as a vital component of the state's comprehensive strategy for reducing wildfire risks. This innovative combination of age-old practices and contemporary fire prevention methods represents a significant improvement over the conventional environmental management techniques that were employed in the past. Could something as simple as a herd of goats really outperform million-dollar machines in one of the most expensive states on Earth? Bush clearing activities are a highly expensive undertaking due to the fact that they are founded on extensive use of mechanized machines, which must be refueled constantly for them to achieve optimum performance. Secondly, the plants being cleared not only have to be operated, but must also be transported to specific points of disposal, and this generates additional costs of operations that contribute to the overall cost of the clearing operations. The needs of caprine vegetation management systems are remarkably straightforward and simple. These animals, goats specifically, need very little in the way of infrastructure, which is really just several fundamental elements that include access to watering holes, a supply of necessary minerals, and adequate shelter, most notably in the form of canine guardians that serve the useful purpose of repelling probable predators. This level of uncomplicated provision completely covers the whole range of resources necessary to create optimum operating parameters for these systems. Caprine laborers demonstrate a wonderful level of adaptability when faced with adverse and hostile climatic conditions. They are capable of maintaining their levels of productivity even where there is increased solar radiation, and they do this without exhibiting any signs that would indicate heat stress or physical fatigue. Furthermore, their inherent ability to move around and navigate vertical ground makes them phenomenally efficient when climbing steep inclines with ease. This makes them able to access hard-to-reach areas that can be a source of great problems and challenges to human workers who can fail in such an environment. As a result of this amazing adaptability, the potential for workplace hazards is significantly reduced, and the incidence of unnecessary injuries that may occur in such an environment is kept at a minimum. Classic mechanical plant control machinery, such as lawnmowers, weed whackers, chainsaws, agricultural equipment, and pruning shears, is highly risky with a greater likelihood of generating fires when used during the critical seasonal windows when the conditions will be particularly conducive to starting such fires. Standing in sharp contrast to these mechanical devices, caprine workers, such as goats or other equivalent animals used for the task of grazing, effectively eliminate this risk of fire entirely from the workplace, making them a much safer alternative. This considerable divergence between mechanical and biological approaches identifies the unique advantages that biological plant control approaches have over mechanical ones. Caprines boast a remarkable competency in managing nuisance plant species, and especially those that human workers find difficult to successfully hand graze, demonstrating their innate aptitude in doing so. A staggering example of this incredible capability is observed when one takes a close look at the attempts by human beings to pluck thistle plants from the soil. Hand plucking of such plants exhibits a difficulty level that is unbelievably high, which is mostly attributed to the numerous protective features that these plants have. Yet, if one pauses to get a complete image of a goat approaching plants of a similar kind, one is faced with an altogether different and confounding set of circumstances. The animal eagerly consumes the plant matter, without any regard for the defense systems that the plants possess. The act plainly points to the goat's pleasure in being fed, particularly as shown through what appears to be a desire to feed on thistle. Areas in the Mediterranean region, and especially California, benefit greatly from the utilization of caprine services due to the possession of huge areas of shrubland that are characteristic of these areas. The anatomy of a goat is quite remarkable. Their mouths are narrow and deep, an adaptation that makes them quite distinct from other ungulates. This specifically enables them to browse selectively on various forms of woody cover, an adaptation other hoofed mammals lack. Unlike other counterparts, the unique outline of a goat's mouth enables them to efficiently pick out various types of plants and thus navigate and reside in thick sets of bushes with excellent efficiency. One of the most amazing and striking aspects of caprine behavior, i.e., goats and related species, is undoubtedly their remarkable ability to take on a bipedal stance when they are engaged in feeding behavior. This remarkable capability allows them to achieve vertical feeding heights that can reach up to approximately 6 feet in length, and this shows how remarkably adaptable they are. Their agile lingual appendages, i.e., their tongues, and their specially designed labial structures work in harmony with one another to facilitate this new feeding behavior. Also, these remarkable animals possess specialized physiological systems that are specifically set up to enable them to detoxify numerous toxic substances effectively. This special biological adaptation makes it entirely possible for them to feed on some plants that are poisonous to most herbivorous animals, and hence they can exploit food sources that others are unable to consume safely. The working premise reveals itself on observation. Caprine laborers are very flexible in their functional capabilities. Their preference against grass types for shrubs is a useful property for the control of vegetation. They tend strongly toward upper feeding plains, never avoiding thick cover to opt for higher, drier bush forms. This discriminatory feeding behavior, seemingly quirky on observation, is of considerable utility for discriminating control of vegetation. Their software has been utilized less and less each year as land managers become more aware and appreciative of the important work they do to bring sustainable principles to vegetation management. In the calendar year 2023, goat crews were exposed to record levels of operational demand, something that can be directly attributed to the unprecedented levels of rain that fell during the winter months. This resultant weather pattern then went on to induce an unprecedented and record-breaking increase in vegetative growth across the region. This particular climatic condition not only impacted the ground, but also resulted in an unprecedented duration of their typical operating period, which was considerably longer than in the past. Historically, their services were rendered from the month of April through to September. However, for the year 2023, the season started earlier in March and surprisingly ran on to November, a testament to the enormous shifts in environmental conditions. Despite this prolonged duration, supply was outstripped by demand due to the inherent limitations of caprine grazing habits. Unlike mechanical reproduction technology, such biological inputs breed at fixed rates regardless of vegetation cover. Consequently, additional caprine resources were required by way of purchase or leasing arrangements in order to achieve adequate service levels during the prolonged operating period. With nature pushing the limits and demand outpacing supply, cities found themselves asking a surprising question: could a herd of goats actually be the next essential emergency service? Goats signing contracts. The amazing and almost miraculous vision of goats being utilized in city fire management has likewise progressed far beyond the status of mere fantasy in contemporary times. What was formerly a revolutionary practice, merely an experimental procedure, has evolved into a high-tech business in its own right, with these agile and remarkable creatures now undertaking intricate and advanced contracts with whole cities around the nation. In fact, the goats themselves are not being expressly provided the contracts that they fall under. Rather, their owners have actually become contractually engaged with numerous cities in recent times. This has turned what was once thought of as an unorthodox or out-of-the-ordinary practice into one that is well accepted and regarded as a standard norm. It wasn't until the year 2023 that Fire Grazers Incorporated, which was well known for its innovative approaches, ultimately took the significant move of formalizing this worthwhile practice by actively pursuing formal contracts with many municipalities. Among them were prominent municipalities such as Torrance, Hidden Hills, Westlake Village, and Orange County, which realized the worth of this undertaking. Their activities, nonetheless, did not conclude with public institutions only. They also approached some of the wealthiest private landowners of the affluent areas of Beverly Hills and Calabasas, who were especially among the ones interested in this program. These landowners perceived this newly established practice as a critical way of safeguarding their extensive estates against potential danger. West Sacramento has been at the forefront of this vital project since 2013, utilizing a properly programmed plan that effectively prevents fires. The City Council has meticulously planned a well-researched and organized timetable that enables the deployment of the goat herds 2 times annually. The spring deployment is specifically designed with the aim of eliminating the new growth that sprouts during the rainy season period, whereas the fall deployment is specifically designed to eliminate the dry brush that accumulates throughout the summer. This particular strategy, which can be described as strong and demanding, does not come with a low price. Indeed, during only the first half of the year 2023, the city paid a notable sum of $150,000 for the services provided by Western grazers. The expense is certainly justified and well invested, since the company's goats successfully performed the significant task of maintaining the land within the established parameters. These successful experiences, using this new approach, have created a great deal of international interest, and a variety of countries have replicated and implemented their own adaptations and interpretations of the program. For example, the nation of Chile has had great success with the establishment and operation of goat brigades. Apart from the primary objective of halting the devastating spread of forest fires, the work done in Chile has also revealed an additional environmental gain that cannot be ignored. They have managed to prevent soil erosion in other forests around the nation. This noble achievement showcases the variety of gains precipitated by their work. The method being utilized by the Chileans is closely related to what is being employed by their American counterparts, where a strong focus is being placed on the natural grazing patterns exhibited by goats and the integral role they play in their ecological control strategies. One of the most striking and dramatic demonstrations that clearly showcased the effectiveness of this particular approach occurred during the catastrophic wildfires in Chile in February 2023. The horrific and destructive fires resulted in not only heavy human casualties, but also injured tens of thousands of individuals, leaving a lasting impact on the community. This devastating disaster affected approximately 1 million acres of land located in the south-central region of Chile, causing widespread destruction and loss. Amidst all the devastation and destruction surrounding these events, however, the Bosque de Chic natural forest area emerged as a breathtaking and beautiful exception to the overwhelming tragedy. This extensive 39-acre park, which was ringed by wildfires raging from every direction, incredibly remained completely unscathed by the ordeal. The chief reason why the Green Haven was saved from the fire was entirely because of the fire breaks that were rendered possible through the diligent work of the goats, thereby establishing the actual and effective role played by this novel method of fire control. Canada has indeed implemented this exact method. In the summer of 2023, Quesnel, British Columbia, launched a large-scale program with goats for several reasons: fighting off invasive species of flora and reducing wildfire risk. The program was a complete success. Although rampant wildfires raged on the outskirts of the city in 2023, none of them spread to the residents. Despite the occurrence of a series of wildfires to the west of Quesnel, which led to the mandatory evacuation of the neighboring Eagle Lake community, Quesnel town itself was neither threatened nor under any imminent threat. This situation is indeed remarkable and unusual in light of the reality that the year 2023 has been recorded as the worst fire season ever experienced in the history of British Columbia, with an unprecedented amount of over 7.4 million acres of land being torched and ravaged by these disastrous fires. Quesnel's survival through this tough time can be directly attributed to its favorable location within one of the province's most fire-resistant areas. This significant fact has been made possible to a great extent due to the city's novel and pioneering program that involves using goats as a natural way of fire prevention. The shared environmental risks of this system, though, go well beyond the mere prevention of fire outbreaks happening in the first place. We should value the significant and valuable role that such animals play in managing and regulating invasive plant species that could damage native ecosystems. Although the target species initially selected for implementation of this methodology was black mustard, it should be noted that this particular method is effective for controlling and managing a wide range of invasive flora other than a single species. The underlying process achieves this through a distinctive biological mechanism that serves to play a fundamental role. When other herbivores consume such plants, the seeds within the plant have a tendency to remain intact while passing through the digestive system of the herbivore. Eventually, these resilient seeds are able to germinate once again in the respective regions where the waste of the herbivore is subsequently deposited. This remarkable biological process facilitates the invasive species not only to reproduce, but also to expand into new and different regions, potentially triggering further ecological problems. However, it needs to be realized that seeds that have been eaten and subsequently passed through the digestive system of a goat exit the animal in such a form that they are no longer viable and cannot germinate. This particular trait of goats makes them much more likely to be utilized as a highly effective agent in preventing the dissemination of invasive species, and thereby playing a significant role in the conservation and protection of natural ecosystems. We have now come to the end of today's video. We hope you enjoyed it, and if so, be sure to leave us a comment on your thoughts. See you next time.